G'day, guys. Good morning to everyone, or good evening to others. Good to see everyone. Oh, Richard's here. G'day, Richard. Aloha. Lukey's here. Always good to see you, mate. Camel one that you did last time to me. I actually looked at it last night and I just, yeah. Got a few laughs out of it. Yes. Some people dislikes. Did they actually leave dislikes? Let me see. Out of interest. I do occasionally get some dislikes. Oh, one. There you go. 9 people watching, 8 likes, 1 dislike. So I've upset someone. Oh well, you can't please everyone. You definitely can't please everyone. So be it. There's always somebody that's going to get upset in this world for whatever reason. Wrong stream, Shell. Wrong stream. Good day to you, Dr. Shell. But wrong stream. Roy's later in the evening. You'll have to wait. Anticipation. So I'm not cute enough for you. I'm not, I don't do it for you. Oh, God. Women. Making coffee. I decided not to make coffee this morning. I just sort of, I'll go right through until much later on and probably break my time restricted feeding later in the day, so to speak. Not that, I mean, if you just have cream and coffee, it's not going to basically make much of a difference. G'day, Sky. And I'm on my way to bed in a few. Fair enough. It is late. I'm there. Yeah, it's just basically trying to get those different time slots is never easy. Double. Richard. You're trying to make everyone hungry, aren't you? Delivery trying to make everyone hungry. How's everybody? I've been looking at the recent veganerized sort of myth busting type videos that I've been making. I thought they'd actually get a bit more views. I was sort of a bit surprised. Aren't they that good, or could they be done better? I'm trying to make them in little short, just short time slots. I know you guys like to pig out on Harry, but I'm trying to make them, so they can be shareable, so they can be shared around. Because I'm always sort of, mine tend to be very long. I get complaints all the time that, that they're too long and, stuff like that. So I'm just trying to make them a bit, how would you put it? Concise, sort of bite size, the sort of modern thing that people use, bite size. That's right. So I don't know. You haven't, Shell. Oh, God. Oh. Go and do a couple of Hail Marys and whip yourself for failing to do that. Didn't you get, or haven't people been getting notifications? I wouldn't be surprised with YouTube here calling it vegans, the myths and falsehoods of veganism. Probably it triggers the AI to such an extent that it bans the, yes. Great trouble. The mod chatting. like that. Harry sips water. You got that. You got to start with a bit of. I was on the phone earlier. I was on for quite some time, so you end up with a bit of a dry throat. Let alone, I'm going to be doing a few hours with you guys, so. Why are you anti-vegan? Oh. Simple. It's a species inappropriate diet. That's why. I mean, it doesn't engage if you do, it depends on what type of veganism you do. If you do a vegan diet that's basically, how can you put it, which is doesn't have any seed oils, doesn't have any of the refined crap and all that, and it's sort of a low glycemic load type. You could potentially basically lose quite a bit of weight if you do it, because it's similar to like the traditional sort of diet. Vegan diet is like a fasting mimicking diet. That's what it is. Vegans are always, in the old days, they used to always be cleansing and doing all this sort of stuff, and but at some point, they did basically, oh well, it is what it is. Sky, I'm not setting up a separate thing. That's not the purpose of this channel. I mean, if people want to donate, fine. If if it's available, it's available. It is available. There you go. Thanks, Richard. So it is available. Yeah, I don't get too wound up. That's not the purpose. In terms of the channel, I didn't set it up for those purposes. People want to shout me a drink or shout me a coffee or whatever, fine. I don't. It's not my income. I don't live off social media. I've got a day job. That's my focus. And I'm not interested in living off social media. Look, in the future, who knows? Maybe I'll see it as another income stream. I don't think it's going to be on this channel. It'll be some other sort of thing, but definitely not that sort of stuff. So thanks, Richard. Appreciate it. Yeah, so in that regard, the traditional one was very much a fasting mimicking type diet, and people lost weight because you didn't engage the Randall cycle, Well, too late, Harry. Too late, Harry. Deal with it. Thanks, Richard. He's persistent, isn't he? Damn, he's persistent. You take it whether you like it or not. I hope I can get some off YouTube here before they basically start demonetizing me at some stage. As Bart said, at some point they'll find you, they'll locate you, Harry, and they'll go through every single video and they'll find just one little indiscrepancy here or there, and they'll just demonetize everything on you. So, it's basically the way it goes. Yeah. Oils are fine once in a while. They're rancid, mate. They're rancid and toxic. They come out of an oil refinery, and most when you actually extract any PUFA from, because mainly most plants have PUFA or polyunsaturated oils with a double and triple bonds, and those are very vulnerable to oxidation. So the moment you take them out, they oxidize. I've done videos. You can go through all my playlist of PUFA videos and all that, which I cover all that sort of stuff and show the differences between the animal PUFA and the seed oil type PUFAs. So there's plenty of evidence out there in terms of lipid peroxidation. But Kay's done a lot on extracting oils, stuff like that. Actual research scientists that I collaborate with. So yes, you're fairly wrong on that. And as a fasting mimicking diet, you can basically get some benefit short term, but long term, the deficiencies will kick in. And and as I say to people, show me one. I don't need 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, I can just off the top of my head think of 2 multi-generational carnivorous societies: the Inuit and the Maasai. Milk, blood, and meat. Multi-generational, have a lot of people with longevity. They've been researched by George V. Mann and many other researchers in the past and even in recent times. So you show me one vegan multi-generational society. None exist. And even the ones that do exist, like plant-based, which is basically like the Indian type or the vegetarians, they don't have longevity. They had much shorter lives. And the majority of them basically have a lot of health issues, especially nowadays, where they've actually increased their consumption. Back then, they actually underate, and so they weren't engaging the Randall cycle at all. Now they're packing in both oils and all that, and they've reduced their dairy consumption because the old vegetarians, used to consume a lot of eggs and dairy. They no longer do that. And that's why those old studies actually made them look better, because they had a higher animal diet compared to today. Now they've gone more veganish and suffering for it. So, yes, look at my videos and you'll realize. Thanks, Kate. A super sticker. You're amazing. Oh, cute. I wish I could dance like that. Now that's really, I mean, look at the dancing there. I'm not bad at dancing, but, that is special. Anyway, let's move on to the regulars. Figo HD, good to see you, mate. Yes, these time zones are a problem. Devox. Well, they could learn a lot. I'm not here, as an Orthodox Christian. I don't hate them or anything like that. I hope that they basically get out of that cult, which is what it is. It's an unhealthy, misanthropic cult that hates humans, that basically thinks we're the scourge of the earth, when we're created in the image of God. We're fantastic. We're great. Nothing to... But I always point to them. I say, where you define your ethics? They've got nothing to say. Because most of them are atheists. But even that, is basically they have to then accept evolutionary biology, which I do as well. Don't get me wrong. I'm both a Christian and a believer in evolutionary biology. But at the same time, the difference is that, if you believe in evolutionary biology, you're talking about different species, how adaptable they are, and how they compete within an environment. Well, that's speciesism. So Darwinian logic tells you that every single species is a species. To go against your own species interests is basically being a misanthropist, being against your own. You would never see that from a lion. Where smart enough and dumb enough to basically be to in the 21st century to actually start having these sort of stupid ideas. It's basically because we're disconnected from nature and from our origins, and that's why we're in these hermetically sealed environments, completely disconnected, and we have this sort of way of thinking. It says more about us than basically our origins and stuff like that. So yes, but unfortunately, a lot of the veganerized community are unwilling to look at it like that. You know, you sit in front, you put a whole bunch of food, and you sit in front of a bull or a cow, it'll just trample all over you to get to the food. You think it gives a shit? Absolutely nothing. You know, most animals, we've just got a frontal lobe, and we've got enough intelligence to be able to make sense of the world much more than other animals. And as a consequence of that, in the 21st century, disconnected from nature and reality, we can come up with certain, narcissistic, crazy ideas like veganism, which are completely contraindicated to both the human diet. And we can see that, people fall apart. Give them a couple of years on veganism, they deteriorate unless they start doing steroids and taking all sorts of supplements. And even that only helps marginally, as if people had supplements 100 years ago. Give us a break. The only people that take supplements are vegans and sad dieters. And why? Because sad dieters are so deficient. And some of us take, because we were both vegans, sad dieters, and whatever, and we need to fix and correct deficiencies. But once we do that in the first couple of years, then our own diet, if we consume a mix of animal foods, we don't need anything of that sort, unless we want to do biohacking like I do. That's a different thing. That's not basically what you need to survive. It's what you need to basically fix things, correct things. If I was on a species appropriate diet from a young age on a low deuterium diet, I would not be I'd have greater mitochondrial density, like the guy that actually competed, that ran up the hill with an 80-year-old, and Mary couldn't keep up with him, and she's in the mid-40s, and she couldn't keep up with this guy. Why? Because that old man still has very good, healthy mitochondria, because hasn't been eating a lot of kibble and all that, which is very high in deuterium, damaging with neutrons, damaging the nanomotors of the mitochondria, and basically making that person sick and old. You're deluded, Taylor. You're deluded every time you take your tests, your blood tests. You're deluded, mate. They're irrelevant. It's what your genes determine. Some people are hyper responders. I'm not. I mean, I can eat whatever. My cholesterol is always on the lowish side. Why? It's just genetics. Other people are hyper responders. They've got an ApoE of 4.4, 4.3, and 4.2. So the resident time of chylomicrons is basically slower. They take up fat into the liver much quicker, which is fine if you've got a clean carnivore, clean keto type diet, which is what our ancestors had for the most before supermarkets or refrigeration existed. That's what people had. They were seasonal. Only had access to a bit of seasonal sugar. The majority of the year round it was animals, and maybe a few greens that basically were as starvation foods or just added. That's about it. There wasn't much out there. So you're deluding yourself. But you're in a modern world now where you can take all these crap supplements and stuff like that. And then you basically, low cholesterol with using seed oils and using basically all these things is just basically means that you're actually putting a whole lot of phytosterols in there. That means plant-based. You're displacing human cholesterol with plant-based cholesterol. And that cholesterol basically gets into your red blood cells and prevents them from elongating. That means being flexible. They stiffen up, and then they can't get into the little crevices, which means you create hypoxic environments around your body. those hypoxic environments will actually mean less oxygen to those areas in your body. That means more damage over time. More damage, potentially creating more senescence. Senescence, excessive senescence over time can lead to cancer. So you want to go down that path? Good luck to you. And good to see you, Sky. I need to probably send you an email and have a bit of a chat and see whether we can do something together. Maybe on your channel this time. Send me a link. G'day, Harut. It's been a while, mate. Been a while. Good to see you here. Yeah, I'm basically anti-BS. And most of the things that vegans say is BS, is just based on zero science. It's all epidemiologic, observational crap. Food frequency questionnaires. Anybody can basically anyone can go out there and actually ask people to fill out a whole lot of questionnaires. And the majority of questionnaires are filled out by people on a sad diet. They're not even healthy people. They're actually on a sad diet. And I always say to people, like the veganerized community who use an old study, the Adventist study, which is in the 1950s. Now, in the 1950s, vegetarians then consumed quite a bit of eggs and dairy. They don't anymore. They don't do modern ones, do they? They do all these old ones. I guess. I wonder why, because, it doesn't suit their agenda. So all they do is data mine. It's called data mining, the old studies against new studies to basically make them look better, which is bullshit. Because if you were to look at people on even a mixed diet, or like on a standard diet back then, they were much healthier. In the 1950s, the general community, you didn't have all the modern day diseases that have exploded to the level. Yes, you did have some, but that was because in the 1930s, they introduced a lot of seed oils because of the Second World War. You can't transport animal fats very easily. It was much easier to transport a whole lot of oils around to the troops, and the troops were given cigarettes. So after the Second World War, when the troops came back, in the 1950s, they started getting cardiovascular disease because of the seed oils and the excessive amount of tobacco consumption in that period. And that's why in more recent times, it's sort of plateaued out, both because we've improved cardiovascular surgical techniques, but also because things that have exploded are things like cancer, things like diabetes, all these other things, which are basically very much metabolic diseases. So where the other ones, tobacco consumption has declined, alcohol consumption has slightly declined as the population ages, and a number of other things that have changed. And as a consequence, some of those other risk factors are no longer to the same degree. But we've created new ones which tend to exacerbate other metabolic pathways of insulin resistance and whatever else. So you got to look historically back to realize how we missed a lot of things. But even back in the 1950s, the amount of cardiovascular disease was quite relatively low compared to today. So, and people back then, and it was only US, it wasn't places like Australia or New Zealand or places like that. It was much lower because they weren't exposed to the fast food industry to the same degree as the US in the 1950s. But, you go back to then, very, very low. And then we saw from the 80s onwards an explosion. And what changed? We flipped the diet from 2/3 animal to 2/3 plants. We've done the experiment now for about 40 odd years. It failed miserably. So let's not go 100% because then we'll fail completely. That basically would be stupidity at its best. G'day, Deborah. Good to see you here. Yes. fair enough trouble. I understand. Some of us have to get their beauty sleep. Yes. Doesn't matter. We're easy, Luke. We're easy. Typo mistake here or there. God. We don't get wound up in little, like some people get triggered with little mistakes here or there. And I go, chill out, get over it, get a life. Yeah, I forgot to answer that part. Next week I'll be doing it. I just couldn't do it yesterday. I was caught up with something. So next week I'll be doing it. The Zoom thing will be then. And I hope you're on your best behavior as well, Trouble. We don't want to ban you. Knowing basically when he's not here actually today, so I can actually say whatever I like. When Blinky turns up, we'll just ban him just for fun. G'day, Lukey. What do you think? Next week when I do the Zoom thing, when Blinky comes on, do I just ban him just for fun for about 15 minutes or something like that?
I think it's a good idea.
I'm probably the only person on YouTube that I've got a friendly troll. My personalized troll.
Such an honor.
Oh, exactly. I want to talk to you about videos, etc., Harry. You got to just email me, and yep, okay, I'll do that. I'll send you an email, and I'll work out a time that actually suits both of us. So do something together, and it doesn't have to be ultra sciencey. It can be a bit, let's say, a bit on the humorous side as well. I try to actually apply some level of humor within and lightheartedness within most of my streams anyway. So, and even I've classified all the recent stuff, the myths and falsehoods of veganism. I've classified them all as entertainment. I haven't classified them as science technology like all my others. So the down as entertainment, the classification. So because I'm going to use some humor in them, because that's the whole purpose, to just show how ridiculous some of their arguments are. So I hope that is working. Hope some people get a bit of enjoyment out of them as well. I'm going to put a community post, I haven't done it yet, and just ask people what other myths and falsehoods they want me to tackle. So, because there may be some that I haven't thought about myself. So we can sort of add those. And the whole purpose is to make a long series with a lot of small point forms. I'm trying to keep it within 10 minutes or less. So then people can actually use that as argument points. So on other channels, or when they've got a relative saying something, they can go, hold on, check this out. This just demystifies and actually clears up your confusion on this point or that point. Because people have a lot of different little quirks on this. They'll always throw little arguments, and you can go, I've got the counter for that. I've got the counter for that, for that, for that, for that. And that's what you need, basically, to be able to deal effectively. And Shell, naughty, naughty girl. There's plenty of times to watch them. Oops. I just switched to the private chat. Vegan videos are great, easy to digest, unlike what those idiots are eating. Yes, very much so. Scotty, Good to see you, mate. Oh, well, it's one of those things, Sky, the YouTubia, strange. Don't know. It's Yep, Richard got his up. I'll put it up again. I do have a PayPal thing, but I use it for business purposes. I don't want to mix the two up. I do have some a trust, and then I also have a name company, and they do other things. So I just do not want to mix them up with YouTubia. So, like anything, you got to keep things separate in that regard, and I try and do that as much as possible. Because otherwise, just the accounting issues after trying to work things out is going to be a bloody hassle, a nightmare. Actually, that's the other thing I need to do. Got more tax stuff that I have to do that I've neglected. Anyway, I've still got time for some of the stuff that I need to do. I should be getting actually money back from them actually this year, so that'll be good. For some of the stuff, I'll have to pay fork out for some others, so it all balances out. But I'll be getting a bit more this year from them than I tend to pay, so that will be interesting. People and their royals. Oops. Ah, yes. Just there's always a next time, Sky. There's always another time. But thanks for the sentiment. G'day, mate. How's it going, Wes? Oh, well, it's fine to do that sort of stuff. Yes. Avocado oil and coconut oil, very good for lathering the skin, especially if you're into extracurricular activities. She's always good. Well, tries to. I wouldn't say good. I'd say she's doing good. Your language seems to upset YouTube, Derp. Have you have to keep releasing you from the chat jail? I've actually sometimes, when I've done some of my videos, I've actually found like YouTube comes up with all these sort of things and says the reasons why they don't like my video. So I've tried to nowadays try to keep down the F words and a few other things that I usually throw here and there. It's hard to do because it's not in my nature to do that, but yes, a difficult one. It depends. If you come from Northern Europe and you've got a salicylate sensitivity, coconut oil may not be the best option for you. If you come from Southern Europe, like my ancestry does, Middle East, Southeast Asia, Pacific Islanders and all that, and a number of people in the Americas, Central America in particular, they do have salicylate tolerance. So it doesn't annoy them, doesn't affect them. So if you have foods high in salicylates, not an issue. I don't get an issue at all. But people like the Inuit, people, Northern Europeans, North Asians, sort of Mongolia, China, those sort of areas, Mongolia itself and parts of Siberia, the populations in those don't tend to have salicylate tolerance, and they can react with large amounts. There's also some people that don't do very well with a lot of medium chain triglycerides. They tend to basically cause them, allergies. So there is a sensitivity because their bodies are more, adapted to long chain fats. And so when you add too many medium chain triglycerides, they tend to be a bit more reactive. And they tend to also be in those colder climates as well. So just keep those things in mind. Where are your genes from, your origins and stuff like that. And sometimes if you've got mixed genes, it's very hard. It's just, how do I feel? So not an easy thing.
It is often the case for me as well. I just have to keep trying out stuff because I don't know which genetics prevail. So keep experimenting.
Yeah, well, Leaky's a prime example of, has both indigenous Brazilian genes and European genes. And so as a consequence, can sometimes have certain types of reactions to certain types of foods that, genetically he's got susceptibilities to. It's just the way it is. In Brazil, Leaky, what's the sort of prevalence of things like celiacs and stuff like that?
Oh, I'm actually not sure, and I would think it varies a lot state by state. But
is it where you've got more indigenous populations? It's much higher.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, there's also, I think this connection hasn't been studied a lot, but there's something to be said about mental health issues, which probably do track with the gluten intolerance as well. So
there's a lot of basically like leaky gut issues when it comes, autism type behaviors and stuff like that. You find leaky gut. That's why I usually say to people, there's a lot of associations out there with substances. Like I get a lot of people sending me emails and saying, "Oh, have you seen this? Have you seen that?" And they talk about different exposures of these sort of people to either vaccines or to mineral compounds or things like that. And I usually turn around and say, "Well, hold on. If you look at even I think the highest amount that I've actually seen in a vaccine in terms of aluminium, for instance, is 4.4 milligrams. That's the highest. Well, that's a one-off exposure to that level. Well, do you know what 100 grams of some grains are? Over 100. 117 in what I think it's, I won't say which grain because I can't remember now off the top of my head, but there was one grain that was over 117 for 100 grams. So do you think that a child is not going to be exposed, that is eating a bit of grain here and there, exposed to more aluminium from the actual grains that they eat than basically the vaccine? This is what I'm saying. People, just because you find in people that have got leaky gut, is it the grains causing the leaky gut and then putting more of the stuff in to the system, and then a poor, because I've talked about this before, bile removes a lot of this sort of stuff, the excess minerals. But if you don't have a good gallbladder function, that can be a problem, and that can even be in young age if they're not on a species appropriate diet, not eating enough fat. Use it or lose it, so to speak. So then it's not functioning properly. Then it's not basically clearing out these things. And usually kids that usually have these issues have a lot of this reactivity, tend to be, so basically I think that that's really an important thing to understand about the. I just sent you a private message, Leaky. That's a sort of an issue in that regard. for different populations. And I think that you really need to know your ancestry, very important, and how things may react or not react or stuff like that. So it's just the way it is. All oils are rancid. Very well stated, Shell. Exactly, they are. Even olive oil, if you leave it for long enough, I've shown, I can't remember which one of the studies that I actually showed in one of the PUFA videos, where I showed even olive oil becomes rancid and aldehydes go up in it. And aldehydes, are an indicator. When you see aldehydes rising, they're an indicator not only of primary oxidative products, but secondary oxidative products. So we're talking about massive rancidity. So the higher the aldehydes, the higher the rancidity, the higher the oxidative primary and secondary products tend to be in oils. And even olive oil is basically something like 3 times that of like avocado, for instance, or something like that. And even that is multiple times greater than butter or ghee. Or ghee actually does a bit better than butter. It's probably because it's got less proteins and it's more clarified. It's been, it actually is much more stable. So it does better than butter, ghee, in terms of stability. You can keep ghee out. You don't have to put it in the fridge, where butter, you got to keep it in the fridge. Otherwise, it will, over time, develop some level of rancidity, but very low. It takes a very long time compared to anything else. But yeah, these are problems. But if you've got very tiny amount, like trace elements, I mean, you can cook pork, and I've shown in one of those very trace elements. That's fine, because if you're on a species appropriate diet, you've got lower insulin, higher glucagon. Your insulin to glucagon is 1.3, having a steak. Automatically, your intracellular antioxidants are up. Glutathione is up. As long as insulin is not very high, which is only happens on a carbohydrate-rich diet, your glutathione will be upregulated, which basically means it can refresh an electron donor and stabilize all those fats that are coming in from animal foods that even got trace elements. What we're getting from seed oils is basically not trace elements, but massive amounts. Overwhelm the body. The body just can't keep up, and let alone with a high insulin, because people are eating a lot of kibble as well, a lot of refined crap and all that. It means insulin is even higher, suppressing intracellular antioxidants like glutathione and superoxide dismutase and stuff like that to such levels that basically, even the small amounts of antioxidants that somebody may even supplement, like vitamin C or vitamin E, is going to do absolutely nothing to help. That's why a lot of the studies where they've actually shown on sad dieters eating all this crap, these sort of supplements don't work, because basically they need to be refreshed. You need glutathione to refresh both vitamin C and vitamin E, because otherwise they become pro-oxidants. Once they release, they electron donor one of their electrons, they become unstable. That's the purpose of glutathione, because those different elongated, small little wiggly things of different types of vitamin E, the tocopherols and all that, they actually penetrate into the cell membrane to different length. That's why they have different length sizes, and they basically will affect the integrity of those lipid membranes, those bilayers. They'll basically make sure that if they get a bit of reactivity here or there in the body from oxidation of whatever, even exercise oxidation, that can create some level of reactivity, they will basically electron donor and stabilize. And then the intracellular glutathione will refresh them. That's the purpose. It's a brilliant system as long as it's working properly. If it's not, then you've got a problem, As they say, Houston, we've got a problem. And most people are putting crap into their mouth, and that's why they've got a lot of problems. Harry, the Randall cycle. Yeah, the handle cycle. Be activated. G'day, Luke. By mixing our endogenous regulated glucose in and ingesting exogenous fat. No, because glucose is then demand driven. like, so you'll only get as much as the body requires. That can fluctuate a bit higher than normal, because insulin is low, so you can do a lot of exercise, for instance, and your blood sugar will go up slightly, and you can measure that, but then it eventually comes down quite well. And that's just because that, I know Thomas DeLaura did some stupid video just recently that he talked about some stupid study where people that were on a ketogenic diet or low carb diet were actually given a big bolus of 72 grams. Somebody actually told me about it recently, 72 grams of carbohydrate. Well, these people basically, why would you do that? Your whole system is fat adapted. Your enzymes for glycolysis and basically dealing with all that have been down regulated, and that's why the body behaves in a very strange way, because it's not expecting something like that. So, those are just idiotic studies that tell you absolutely nothing. They don't inform. All they basically do is basically confuse people. The reality is, and then he actually had the audacity to say, "Oh, you should carb to maintain some level of carb tolerance or carb sensitivity. You basically need to eat carbs." And I cycle between carbs, and I said, "No, you don't. The Inuit never did that, and many other people don't do that. You don't need to do that. It's unnecessary. It's only people that have got an addiction that can't give up the carbs that need to do that. If you don't do that, basically you won't get these big spikes of blood glucose, because as long as you're not putting in exogenous glucose in, it'll be demand driven. That's the whole purpose. You've got a higher glucagon suppressing insulin, basically putting out demand driven glucose. When you throw a whole lot of sugar in there, you basically just derange that whole system. For what purpose? For an experiment, fine. For a lifestyle, are you for real? Just ridiculous. Yes. But it's just the way it is in that regard. Why not do what? A vegan multi. Multi. Because it's species inappropriate, mate. You don't need to take, if your diet could support you wouldn't need to take a vitamin. But that's because you're disconnected from reality and nature, and so you think that a vitamin, all the sad dieters and vegans are the same. You just pop pills. You're pill poppers. That's basically all you are. You're fucking pill poppers. And you think that everything comes out of a pill. Well, if you go back 40 years ago, there was none of that. You either ate food and got the nutrition, or you basically started suffering a lot of health problems. That's the only reason you guys are holding off the damage, slowing it down by pill popping. So you're able to provide cofactors for all your enzymes to do certain things. But at some point, your body's going to fall apart. It just takes longer. So you can live in that delusional world. Good luck to you. When we look at the archaeological data, Taylor, the N15 data, it's quite unequivocal. It's quite clear. It's high. We were super and hyper carnivores, period. End of story. You've got no arguments. Go and check the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. They've got a definitive studies on N15 data. And you'll see that humans, for the majority of their history, were super and hyper carnivores. In more recent times, that's not the case, but that's in the last couple of thousand years, people changed, shifted because of the megabeast collapse, and we had less access to certain foods. So we were forced to consume some sugar, seasonal sugar and seasonal starch in terms of tubers. But before that, we didn't. And before that, you couldn't, because before cooking, before fire, which was 1.5 million years ago, Homo erectus and many of the other hominins before that could only eat meat They couldn't eat tubers because they were poisonous. They would have killed them. So they only had seasonal sugar in terms of fruit. That was it. And that's only for about 2 months of the year, if that, in some of the colder months. So you basically had no access whatsoever. We didn't have a cecum. We lost our cecum. We've only got an appendix, so we've got no second gut to basically ferment fiber. So the only thing left is animal foods. That's the only thing in a very cold environment that was pre-20,000 years ago. And, you didn't eat those moving animals, you were dead. You were out of energy, out of nutrition. And that's what we've adapted to for millions of years. So why would basically I reject millions of years of evolutionary adaptation to specific foods and the N15 data showing nitrogen 15 being extremely high in the collagen of our bones? And when we look at other species, it's very low. If you look at other species, you may find higher amounts of, even in other species, even in a cow, it still has quite a bit because it's still eating a lot of the protozoa, so it's getting some N14 isotopes. So it's getting some from the actual, in the rumen, the actual bacteria and all that are breaking down some of the fibers and actually extracting some of the actual plant proteins. So it's getting some of those. So it has some N14 isotopes in the proteins of the cow. The rest of it, the fiber gets booted out. And then those proteins, some of the short chain fats, plus the little organisms end up in the acidic last chamber and then basically get absorbed. But the majority of that, it tends to be more N15 than N14, even for the cow. The cow tends to be far more carnivorous than basically at the end stage. It's just the first 3 chambers are fermenters. It doesn't live off fiber. The little organisms are the ones that live off the fiber, and the protozoa and the bacteria and the different other organelles that are in there. So, yes, people seem to not understand that as well. Yes, even most animals in nature, every animal in the sea, except the really tiny little organ like the plankton and stuff like that consume some things, the majority are basically eating each other in the sea. Very few plant eaters in that environment. Or fermenters. That's why you don't see herbivorous animals in the sea. Just don't exist. So it's only on land because some animals have found a way to actually have multi-chambers, stomachs and fermenting stomachs and cecums to basically do that. And even chimps, I've done the videos, or the ones that chats with Bart, where it shows how chimps eat up to a ton of meat a year. A ton. So our closest relative is basically consuming a ton of meat, more than some, mixed dieters nowadays. People on a sad diet don't consume that amount of meat, compared to what the chimp does. In the wild, we're talking about, not the ones that are basically in zoos being fed bananas and aging and dying much earlier. Yeah, delusional, exactly. There are, yes, multivitamin delusional. Yes, exactly. Sure. Podcast. Yes, those sort of tests that are basically meaningless. Go and check your blood works and find out how much damage you've got in your blood system. That's the important stuff. I just lost part of my stream. Bloody hell. Too slow. What do you got against rats? Devox. Look, some rat studies can be useful in terms, not of diet, definitely not. To get a rat into ketosis takes like Skunk Master. Good to see you, mate. Hope things are well in Chicago. Yeah. So when it comes to basically these sort of things, they're pretty much irrelevant. The way I sort of view these tests and stuff like that. Rats are good when you're actually doing like drug tests to see, and even drug tests. There are some drug tests where a rat, as an example, will basically say this drug's fine because it can actually metabolize it. And then you do the human trials and it fails because humans can't metabolize that drug as well. Or the vice versa, the rat fails, and then when they do human trials, it doesn't. So rat studies are good for trying to tease out a few things because, you know, they're a mammal, so you can actually work out some toxicity things. You know, if you give them cyanide, you know, or you get certain things, but they're not a perfect model for a lot of things. You know, at the end of the day, we still need to do human trials, and it's very hard to do them because of ethical reasons. So that's why we don't have enough of the modern information, all that. Harry, can you talk about genetic testing? Is it worth doing? I've done it. I've basically done the 23andMe. It's one of the, and you know, was able to elucidate some genetic pathways that I was being affected. I'm a bit of a like methylation pathways, which I'm one of those rare people, probably I think about 4%, I can't remember. It's got one gene in the choline pathway. And then I've got also the MTHFR issue, but that's a non-issue. I've done a video on that covering that you just need to take riboflavin and it fixes it. It actually pushes up and it improves the enzyme in my body, the way it's actually transcripted by my genes, requires more riboflavin as a cofactor to function better. So when I take, you know, animal foods, which are high in B vitamins, in riboflavin, they basically then that methylation pathway works better. So it's simple as that. Most people can just do a pure carnivore, you know, steak diet, not a problem, because they can convert methionine to basically choline and choline to folate. So they don't even have to consume folate. They don't even have to consume choline. All they have to do is just consume massive amounts of methionine. And I've done a video on that where Gregor talks about, you know, the methionine thing, you know, the video that I'm talking about that I've done on my channel, which I cover. And this one, Taylor should actually go and check this one out. Wouldn't you? Leaky would have to agree with me on this one.
Yes, definitely. That video is top notch.
Exactly. It oops. It really nails the issue for the Vagooneride community. Actually, it's quite humorous as well.
Yes.
Gregor. The nice thing is I've got Gregor there just laying out the whole thing for me, and I just fill in the gaps, which is so bloody nice. It's one of his earlier videos. He doesn't do, which he talks about a 40-year-old vegan that actually died. He was an idiot, basically. He basically took a whole lot of statins and a whole lot of phytosterols, which is those plant-based sterols, and literally that's what really killed him. He doesn't admit, he talks about B12 vitamins and all that, but I've done a bit of a background. This guy was in the Vegan Society in America. He was one of their leaders, and he basically, the Vegan Society of America, I think it's called, or was it called that? They keep on changing their names. But anyway, and that basically was covered quite well in that regard. That's the video. It's called "Are Vegans Right That Meat Increases Homocysteine Levels?" It's the complete opposite. There's been this myth that methionine increases. The more methionine, they were actually intravenously giving the people more methionine, and basically the opposite was happening. The complete opposite was happening. Go and check this video out, Taylor, and inform yourself and learn something. You'll actually see your own Gregor making my point about homocysteine, how bad it is within the vegan community, and basically how an animal-based diet actually fixes it, corrects it. So you may learn something and may prevent yourself from having future health problems. Yeah, they're on a sad diet. That's why it's called a mixed macro diet. When you actually put a whole lot of sugar and a whole lot of fat at the same time in, it engages a thing called the Randall cycle. It blockades at the cell level energy going in, and they're actually starving. Their cells are starving, and they're actually putting a whole lot of fat, depositing in their fat stores. It's basically what humans have always done in the past. Before we had refrigeration, we had seasonal sugar at the end of the summer, early part of the fall, and we pigged out on fat and sugar, and we engaged the Randall cycle, and we fattened up. All species do it. Even the bears do it. They will sit and have a serving of 10,000 grapes in one sitting, and they'll eat a whole lot of fatty animals as well at the same time. And by combining sugar and fat, you engage the Randall cycle. I've actually done on Pim. There's Pim Johnson that I've done a talk about that, and I talk about the origins in the dietary stuff. The first video in the origins of this low fat diet, and it goes back to Walter Kempner, who's a Jew that came out of Germany, 1930s research before Philip Randall in 1963 published his work, which people still don't understand to this day. People still in the low carb community think that sugar will make you fat, or fat, and in the low fat community, like the vegan community, they think that fat will make you fat. No, neither will, if you just have those and nothing else. But if you mix the macros in large amounts, yes. Now, why wasn't it that the case in the past? Well, people were quite physically active. One, they had undernutrition, and two, they worked bloody hard. And the only people that sat on their ass and got sick in the old days were the rich and powerful and the kings, like Henry the Eighth and people like that, fattened up like mad on heaps of food and did no physical activity to basically utilize that excess energy. That's why they were engaging the Randall cycle. But when you're on a low fat or low carb diet, you basically don't engage this system. And then it doesn't really matter what calories, because the hormones act very differently. Your insulin to glucagon stays low. With a low insulin, you can't actually store fat. You burn fat. Even if you're having a potato diet, a pure, nutritionally, you can do it short term as a hack to lose weight. But it will, over long time, you can't sustain it. You can only sustain long-term an animal-based diet doing that. And they are very high in deuterium, which means that, yes, you'll lose weight, you'll uncouple mitochondria, which means you'll bleed off heat, and at the same time, you will basically upregulate hormone-sensitive lipase and burn fat, because your insulin to glucagon is low. That's the whole purpose. When insulin is low and glucagon is slightly up, what it does is the body basically releases fat and oxidizes it. When insulin is high, in a highly fed state, that doesn't. But when you do these extreme sort of dietary approaches, which people call extreme, what happens is you're not engaging that system. The system, basically, the insulin to glucagon, this is where the Randall cycle comes into, to explain the Randall cycle. The Randall cycle is a state where your insulin is relatively low and your glucagon is nearly equal to it. So if you're in a faster state, it's 0.8. So there is 0.8 insulin to glucagon. So there's slightly more glucagon. So you're actually in high ketosis because glucagon is higher, and you also your blood sugars are going to be extremely at that low level of 4 millimoles or around about that, at that level when you're in that state. When you basically eat a steak only diet, you go to 1.3, which basically means your insulin is 1.3 to a ratio. So if you've got, let's say, 100 units, 130 units of insulin, you'll have 100 units of glucagon, that sort of ratio. And they keep themselves in check. If you're basically on a potato-only diet, it's 4 to 1, 400 to 100 glucagon to 400 units in a sense. That's the ratio, 4 to 1. At 4 to 1, you can still burn fat. That's why in a low-fat diet, you can still burn fat. That's why, Walter Kempner had to push the level of fat down to 2% and the protein down to 4%. And increase the sugar to a large amount, and actually even whip his the people that were on the study to make sure they wouldn't lose muscle mass. Because that's what happens to vegans. They lose muscle mass because they don't eat enough sugar. You need to eat more sugar, in that regard, And if you live in Hawaii, it's probably an advantage because you're actually out in the sun and you're depleting deuterium, so the sugar's doing you less damage. In the tropical areas, that's the other thing. You're depleting 90 parts per million every hour. So there are all these little differences. So if you eat, let's say, a steak, which will average out at about the 120 odd, and you eat sugar, which is about the 150 odd or whatever, as an example, 19 parts less. If you're out for enough hours, you can basically bring that below the 130 and do less damage in that sort of environment. So environmental and how much of skin you've got exposed to the deuterium depleting effects of UV. So all these things are into play when it comes to sort of stuff like, and that's why people can go, oh, I've got this example. Yeah, whatever, Do you understand what's actually in terms of quantum biology, what's happening in your body? You're not getting it. That's why you're basically missing all these points. And you think because of an N of 1, which you can't explain very well and that sort of stuff. But people that are basically on a mixed diet, all right. But ultimately, even though you may be able to lose weight on a vegan diet, like on a low-carb diet, because of that lower insulin to glucagon, you may, in the short term, be better than somebody on a high mixed diet, like eating junk food and all sorts of mixed macros, a lot of sugar and a lot of fat. There, if you go and have a meal at McDonald's and eat that sort of lifestyle continuously, you can actually get an insulin to glucagon of 70. That means glucagon is in the toilet and insulin is way up. That is why they're getting sick. That is why they're in a growth state, continuous growth state, these people. And that's why their blood pressure is high, because water retention is only retained due to high insulin. When insulin drops on a low carbohydrate diet or on a vegan diet, what happens is you release a lot of water. That's why you end up with low blood pressure on both diets. The difference is that one is as a short term works, but long term doesn't, makes you deficient and creates a whole lot of health problems. Musculoskeletal problems and everything else. And the other basically is species appropriate, because that's what the N15 data shows in terms of our speciation over millions of years of all hominins. So that's what I go with, Taylor. You want to wake up to yourself and approach things in a similar way, because in the long run, the more deuterium-rich foods you consume, which is basically the sugar stuff that you consume, what will happen is, and also you'll end up consuming more water, which is also very high, it has a similar level of deuterium to fat. Fat hydrates. I've talked about this before. I'm not going to go back into it. Hydrates basically, my recent video talks about it, the myths and falsehoods. They cover that little point on hydration. So go and check that one out. You'll actually get an understanding of the different hydration and deuterium depletion. I touch on it. It's not a deuterium depletion video. That's not the purpose. I discussed it in other videos and in my live streams. But in terms of deuterium depletion, it's really important that we understand that high sugar, high refined sugars in particular, but also high, are not sustainable in the long run, because what you'll do is you'll actually put too much neutrons into the metabolic water, and the more damage you do to basically your mitochondria, the less mitochondrial density you'll have over time, and you will basically have less ability to heal, to repair. You'll create more senescent cells, and you'll decline more rapidly, and your health will go to hell in a handbasket. So, I don't think you've got a good, long life doing that. Even a traditional vegetarian diet with a lot of dairy and eggs is way better than the SAD diet, because you're still getting a lot of good animal foods, as long as you don't overdo the sugary stuff, which unfortunately nowadays many do far too much. Oops. Oh, thanks, Lemmy. Oops. Did he get used to this, to going to places and then coming back? Thanks, mate. Oops. No need. Blinkers, a Muppet. Ah, yes. Yeah, that would be funny, actually. We'll have to ask Leaky politely, can you make blinkers into a Muppet?
Well, since I have homework now.
Hey, and don't tell him anything that what we've been saying, Sky. I know he's got a little pet over there. Ah, yes, there's nothing like humor. There's nothing like humor. I did. You guys are brainwashed. You only believe in you're a cult that basically is a misanthropic cult. Some of your leaders actually believe that humans are a scourge on the planet and should be wiped out. Yes. That sounds very cultish to me. And yes, the 7-day Adventists are definitely a cult. I mean, the lady actually, I think she was demonically possessed, but that's my opinion. Because basically, if you look in the Bible, it's quite clear. God loved the offering of animals, not the offering of plants. So, and let's not forget the apple. Yes, that one. The fruit. Yes, that the snake used. So, yes, definitely. Oh, get over it. Everything dies in nature. Animals eat animals. Get over it. You want to build plants. The plants need other animals, blood and bone. And the greatest thing on the planet is, guess what it is? The greatest thing is fungi. Fungi eat everything and break it all down. So both animals and the plants can actually reuse it. It's called blood and bone. You know, should learn a bit about you know, things. I mean, I know you're in probably in your mother's basement, but you need to get out of the city and actually see how farming is done. To build soils, you need crap from animals, and you also need blood and bone. Most farmers and most horticulturalists and most even people that are into gardening know that if you don't put blood and bone into the soil, not going to work. So, yes. Yeah, it's just illogical. Everything in nature dies. Everything, you know, animals eat animals. They've been doing it for millions of years. That's the reality. If they can't live, if they've got a problem with that, that's their problem. If you took all the carnivores out of the world, grazing would go in overdrive. All animals would overgraze, the herbivorous animals, and what they would do is they would degrade the soil and kill themselves. They'd turn all land into deserts. You basically need predators to basically eat and keep the numbers down and keep them under control. And we did the same thing. We were a high, you know, a super carnivore and super predator. It's just nowadays we've grown up in hermetically sealed and we use computers and all that, and we don't learn those traditional methods anymore. We've been disconnected, as I said. But that doesn't, you know, people don't torture animals at all. Why would they torture animals? The quality of the meat would degrade. If you actually stress an animal, you basically get the meat smelling. Why would a farmer actually deliberately torture an animal? I mean, there are idiots on the web that basically do it. There are idiots. There's always idiots everywhere. But the reality is that a farmer, actually animals are looked after much better than in the wild. In the wild, they congregate together and they're in fear of the predator. That's what they're in, absolute fear of the predator, where the way we do it is very humane. That's why I call it humane. We humanely kill. We basically have them. They have a carefree life, the best life you could have. You're in basically eating grass all day. No predators around to annoy you. You don't congregate with other animals. You just go around all over the place. If you look at animals that are grazing, they're all over the place. They don't have to be congregated together, scared out of their lives to be ripped apart alive by a predator, because that's what happens. Nature is really basically like that. You know, if you can't handle that because you've been brought up in, you know, with cartoons that can talk from Disney World, well, that's your problem. Get over it. You know, you've got the problem, not the rest of us. You've got the problem and all that. And as I said, where do you derive your ethics from? If you derive it from faith, you're wrong. And if you derive it from basically from anywhere else other than yourself, so it's basically just a self-delusion that you've got. Basically, you just can't handle reality. You can't handle death, which is the problem. That is why we call you a misanthropic cult that can't handle death. You're a death cult. You have problems with death. You can't accept the natural cycle of life and death. Everything lives and everything dies in nature. And everything eats everything. It's the carbon cycle, the methane cycle. It's the way nature works. If you can't handle that, you know, you need to find another planet, mate. Or maybe he's waiting to be uploaded into the Matrix. God.
It's like he even confirms the misanthropy by saying that he doesn't care about children.
Exactly. Basically.
Like,
yeah. Basically, they are anti-human. They think we're a scourge. That all other animals have got more rights than humans on this planet. What a load of crap. That's a stupid remark, Taylor. That's a stupid remark. Animals lick their ass. Yeah, well, lions don't do that, and a whole lot of other things. Animals out there, killer whales don't do it. Sharks don't do it. Don't lick their ass. They got what are they called? Those little things, those little fish that actually clean them up.
Ooh, damn, I don't remember the word in English.
Yeah, it starts with M.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name now. Yeah, so it's just, and humans. Well, neither. A lion's a carnivore. A seal's a carnivore. A seal doesn't look like it's a different speciation. So I don't know what you're talking about. You're talking shit, Taylor. Just because we don't look like a lion, neither does a shark. A shark, a bird of prey, like a hawk, that doesn't look like a lion. That's a carnivore as well. Carnivores come in all sorts of sizes and styles and shapes and whatever. You've got to look at the anthropological and evidence. Now, we have some vestigial systems in ours because we were once plant eaters millions and millions of years ago. So unless you basically have a reason to get rid of those things, you don't get rid of them. But there's a thing called the expensive tissue hypothesis. What we did was we shrunk, until the population issues human populations self-correct. You know what it is? It's called poverty. So if you can't basically feed and all that, you basically end up having less kids or going into civil war, and that brings the numbers down. Like animals that basically overbreed, like rats, and overbreed, and then they run out of the food supply and they collapse. Nature is very, let's say, black and white about that. You overextend and you can't adapt to your environment, numbers go down. Humans have war and they cull their numbers that very quickly. I know it's awful to say, but that's how it works. That's how the real world works, unfortunately. And, there's competition and, you can adapt. You're going to be around as a species. You can't, you're history. And I don't see any value in wasting money in keeping species alive and all this bullshit. I don't believe in conservation. I used to. I don't anymore. I basically just do not. Species will find their place. As long as we don't over-degrade our environment, if we do, we'll suffer the consequences as well. We'll see mass starvation and mass deaths of humans. We've had it before. You can't adapt, you die and starve. That's what happens. The numbers go down. Keeps Taylor happy. But it seems when that happens, he gets a bit peeved off. But the reality is, there can be millions of starving people in Africa or elsewhere. It'll put a smile on his face. But if one little rodent or even actually his agriculture kills plenty of rodents for grain agriculture, but one little furry animal, whatever, takes the bullet to be food for someone else. Oh God, that's the end of the world. Grow up. Concerning Folsom Protocol, is the 2-day critical? Not really. Can you only 1 day? I wouldn't. We don't have research, Harut, for those sort of levels. That's the only reason. Really, I don't have a problem with it, but I tend to, because it does suppress mTOR, and you don't want to be doing it. That's why I say don't do it continuously. So if you want to do like a high dose, like on a fasting day, it may be a good idea, because you're just sort of enhancing the sort of the turnover, the clearing out of organelles. But I'd do it like twice a day. I'll do it early in the day, and then I'll do it later in the day, in order to so you still can get some level of mTOR in between to recycle that sort of stuff, if you know what I'm getting at. So And it doesn't really matter what time. Doesn't really matter what time. What time you knock off senescent cells and clear them out of your system, does it really matter? Not really. You know, the whole thing is I don't want people to be overdoing it continuously because of the effects on mTOR. That's the only thing. We don't want to be breaking down tissue. It's like doing a continuous fast. That's not a good thing. So that's the only reason. So that's why I sort of keep to 5 days. If you were to take a more dosages in one day, probably wouldn't cause any real harms. I haven't really seen any toxicity levels at very high doses. So until we have studies in more humans, there may be, there may be a small group of people with certain genetics that may be susceptible. That's why I keep to the protocol the way I've got it designed. It's based to keep it within the safe zone. The reality is we may be able to tolerate far more, but I'm going on the studies, I'm going on the research, and what the research tells us we can and we can't and whatever. So, yes. In that regard. Yes, I mean, I've basically myself, I've basically hunted animals. I've shot animals. I've slaughtered them as well. My first animal that I actually slaughtered, that my father got me to slaughter, I was either 7 or 8 years old. I can't remember exactly. I was quite young at the time, and Dad showed me how to slaughter an animal, and it was it was a sort of a what we call mutton, which is an older lamb, and that was sort of an insightful thing of cutting it up and and stuff like that. And it was all done in the traditional way. You slit its throat and let it bleed. So it was quick, and that was it. And then it became food. Yes, yummy, yummy. So there was basically a lot of that in my childhood. I mean, my parents both came from rural areas of Greece, so I had exposure to the rural environment. In agriculture, both in the lowlands and the highlands, where Dad comes from. So, for me, I grew up connected to the land, connected to the soil, connected to nature. And I love nature. I love nature walking. I love walking through pine trees in mountainous areas. I love doing that sort of stuff, getting out in nature. And that's the difference. I mean, you've probably seen some of my videos that I've done, like one of the reserves up here that I walk through and all that. I enjoy that. Unlike most of these vegans, like Vegan Gains and all that, they hate nature. They are so disconnected from reality and the natural world. They sit inside their little hermetically sealed homes, and they think that their little box on the internet, that's it, that's life. I feel sorry for them, really. I really feel sorry for them. Yeah, and Devox, you're right. Grain agriculture to provide the kibble for both the sad dieters and for the for basically all the plant-based people is killing shitloads of animals and also degrading the environment. See, at the end of the day, if you want to protect the environment, and we're talking about the environment, I'm not out there to basically support the survival of a species. I don't give a shit of other species other than the human race. I'm a speciesist. Okay? Quite clear and all that. Like all other animals are. If they can't adapt, they're going to be snuffed out. That's the reality. And other animals will take their place. That's how it works in nature. That's Darwinian logic. If you can't accept that, well, bad luck. That's the world. That's how it works. But I'm really against grain agriculture because basically, first of all, it destroys far more land. It basically degrades the soil. And also it puts a whole lot of petrochemical poisons into the environment, which end up in us ultimately, which is really bad. So that's basically the reality in that regard. So yes, I think we've had enough of Taylor and all his nonsense. The reality is that they do far more damage on their kibble diet than anyone else does. They are basically destroying completely and utterly our planet. I'll just hide him completely from the channel and remove him. See you, Taylor.
Oh my god. Nice to get some action once in a while, but this just got really annoying now.
Yeah, exactly. No. If you want to learn something, fine. But if you basically want to be an arsehole about it, and Devox is right, the kibble cult of both the sad dieters and the vegans, because they're just as bad. I mean, the sad dieters are consuming about 70% of their calories are coming from kibble. They're more or less plant-based. I mean, pretty much most of our society is plant-based. That's why they're all sick.
No, it's funny because like you often see people saying, "Oh, I want to go vegetarian or vegan for my health." Look, you are already eating mostly plants. Like, what do you think that's going to do for you?
Precisely. Yeah. And I always say to them, in the 1950s and 1960s and 1940s and 1930s, people were 70%. The further back you go, the more animal-based people were. If you go HD, you just let him. That shit was weird, man. Yes. The more plant-based you go, the worse it is in that regard, So
Oh, by the way, Harry, I'm actually quite surprised. My parents
doesn't have that problem. What was that?
Oh, I'm quite surprised. I was talking to my parents recently, and they're like basically doing carnivore for dinner out like every day or something like that, and they're also fasting as well. And I'm like, what?
Really?
Yeah. When did this happen?
They've probably been watching you on my YouTube channel.
Possibly, and I think they noticed something as well, because when I talk to them over video chat, they must have noticed that I seem much more happy and confident as well, and they're like, okay, that must be doing something for him.
Exactly, and that's what they notice. I mean, I go back to my own self, and I suffered far more anxiety back in those days. And even, people say, well, weren't you the president of the Greek community? Yeah, I was, but you don't know how anxious I was in a lot of those social settings. I just hid it well, but I felt really, not as comfortable. It was always, fine, I've done my duties, now let me get out of here, sort of thing. And the difference is like night and day. When you're eating an animal-based diet, all those things go away. You feel, I mean, people say, why do you do so long, streams? Because I'm so bloody relaxed and at ease. That's why. If I was anxious or whatever, I'd probably only be doing a half an hour or an hour just to basically get it over and done with. I'm much more comfortable. I'm back to where I was as a youngster, because as a youngster, I was a student leader, was in student politics. I'd get out there and actually talk, in front of large crowds of people. And I was really confident, could do that very comfortably. But I had a very high animal diet at the time. It was dairy and animal foods. And I never really liked vegetables ever in my life. Even when that's why I never became a vegan or vegetarian. I just, stuff like that. It was only the low carb community that convinced me to put these damn things in. And all they did over the 5 years is give me about 4 times kidney stones and, and a whole lot of oxalates. And, maybe I should have listened to my body, You know, the only thing I needed to get rid of was the refined sugars and the oils that did the damage. You know, but not put all that garbage of, you know, it took me a number of years to clear out all that garbage out of my system. And oxalate dumping, some sessions that I bloody had where, I mean, it was just, my urine was just frothy like mad. And my pain in my kidneys was just, yeah. Because some people are genetically more susceptible. We don't break down oxalate very well. And I'm one of those people. So it was, yeah, I should have listened to my genetics. Yes. Ah, yes, they are very much. G'day, Kate. Yes, most of them are delusional. They'll lie. You know, one thing that I've actually found with vegans is they just lie. You know, the reality is we all have bad days. Even if you're on a carnivore diet or any, you're going to have some bad days or whatever. You think with these people that everything in their life is perfect. It's just basically they put up a front and lie because it's part of the propaganda thing. You know, the reality is, I could, you know, when Mira was going through her COVID thing and I was at a distance and all that, I mean, I was, you know, really not feeling great. And because I wasn't really there with it and all that, it affected me physically, because it does. You know, it's not only the diet, it's also the lifestyle, it's the environment, it's your psychological state, it's your interaction with other people. All these things have an effect on you. I mean, but the difference is I was able to cope much better. Where in the past, when I was on a very high kibble and seed oil diet, when I had problems and all that, I had some really strange, you know, thoughts that I shouldn't have had, that are not normal, you know. So people shouldn't have those thoughts of topping themselves or doing things harming themselves. You only have those things because you're not eating species appropriate and you've got all these issues. So yes, I did suffer depression. It's the reality. People, unfortunately, yes. Monocrop farming. Monocrop farming is the worst. Absolutely the worst. I mean, even in the past, at least people did some sort of, you know, crop rotation and stuff like that, which basically put animals back on the land, rebuilt the soils, and then they were used in another year for planting plants. You know, so yeah. Yes, pretty of autoimmune malabsorption and gut issues with the majority. Some of these people, you know, I don't trust them because they either lie to other people or lie to themselves, because they have to. It's the only way of actually supporting. We in our community, we're quite clear. We talk amongst ourselves if we've got issues, because we haven't been on a species appropriate diet all our life. Just being on a carnivore diet for a couple of years isn't going to fix everything. You know, there can be a lot of derangements, a lot of damage. I mean, even that lady that was vegan and now is more animal-based, she says she's fixed a lot of things, but some things are just so damaged, they're never going to be fixed because I've caused too much damage. You know, like bone in your back, you know, is really hard to get that to work, to rebuild. You really have to go high on the leucine. You really have to go high on, you know, the animal protein. And you really basically also have to do a protocol of trying to, over the 7 years or a decade, it takes a decade, you have to try and actually make sure you keep all the oxalates out, and you need to use, you know, citrate here and there to make sure as your bone turnover is happening in your spine and other parts of your body, that you're getting rid of those oxalates that have been deposited there and breaking them down and clearing them out, because you don't want them recycled back into the new bone. So, and which will degrade the bone even further. So, as I said, we've done a lot of damage. We're not on. That's why Mary couldn't keep up with basically that Maasai old gentleman. He was on a species appropriate diet from birth. That's the difference. low oxalate, low deuterium diet. That's why I had great mitochondrial density and great bone strength and robustness. We don't. Just because we're carnivores, it's not going to fix everything. We've got a lot of damage, and it's going to take time for people to basically repair those things, you know? So it's the way it is. Oops. G'day, mate. Spencer Steele. How are you? Can you give your opinion on black coffee and your main reason against repeat? Well, black coffee, it's most people say it's got oxalates, but it doesn't. It has very little. If you're having coffee, like instant coffee and all that, then you're going to get more oxalate from instant coffee than you're going to get from a coffee at a barista's. But the difference is that coffee will have more micronutrients the instant one compared to the other one, and more antioxidants, and a number of polyphenols that actually can enhance ketogenesis. So there's a few advantages in instant coffee that compared to the other coffee that you buy in a coffee shop, which is more expensive, but has less oxalate, but also less nutrition because it's heated too much and may have even some oxidized products in it. So I know it sounds funny that the other one, but I like the other one as well. I still go and have a coffee in a coffee shop, but I'm saying that it's, to say that is superior. The flavor maybe, that's a different thing altogether when it comes to flavor. But when we're talking about nutrition, oxalates, and other issues like that, yeah, it's the complete opposite, excluding the oxalates. And there's not much oxalate in it anyway. There's very little, even in the instant. So my main reason when it comes to crackpots like Ray Peat is basically he doesn't understand the Randall cycle. And basically, he doesn't understand deuterium depletion or the deuterium load of the diet that he recommends, which is harmful long-term to the mitochondria. And also, because he doesn't understand the Randall cycle, he thinks that a high-sugar diet is contraindicated, which it isn't. Because in nature, you would have never had all year-round sugar. It just doesn't exist. So how can a diet that basically pertains to be basically an all-year-round human diet when nature itself is incompatible to it? It's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous nonsense. And the only reason why it's better than a standard diet is because it's a diet that is low, maybe lower in fat, and PUFA in particular, and most PUFA comes from seed oils in our diet, which is a good thing because it's oxidized and rancid. Animal PUFA isn't the problem. Animal PUFA is not the problem. I've done a whole lot of videos on animal PUFA and how it's within the matrix of the flesh of animals and in the matrix of the fat layers, bilayers within the actual fat parts of the animal. It's stabilized. And that's why even when you cook it for 2 hours, you only get trace elements. You don't get the primary or secondary oxidation product. All cooking, whether even a plant, will generate more primary oxidative products. That means if you cook vegetables, they will produce more. And if you cook basically things like seeds, they'll even produce even more compared to basically anything else out there. So the reality is that Ray Peat doesn't understand the Randall cycle, and his diet basically will put too much burden on the mitochondria in the long run because you're having both you need to balance animal flesh with animal fats to balance out the deuterium levels. When you add sugar, which is high deuterium, then add animal flesh, the meat, the protein part, which is also much higher, you're actually putting a much higher overall. You can't dilute it. Now, because you're not oxidizing protein, you're not going to be getting much of the high deuterium content of protein of animals is irrelevant, of all protein. that's higher in deuterium of both animal and plants, because it's used as structural material, unless you're basically in rapid starvation, and then that's a different thing. But if you're not in rapid starvation, you'll be using that for your muscles as structural material, and you need that growth factor for muscle protein synthesis. So it's not a bad thing. As I said, deuterium in its right place is a good thing. Deuterium in the wrong place, in the mitochondria, affecting energy production, is a bad thing. So it depends where the deuterium is in this case. That is why you need the energy of animals, fat, to basically to provide deuterium depleted water, and basically reduce the deuterium load in terms of oxidative phosphorylation. Because if you don't, you will lose more mitochondrial density over time. And that's what's happened to Ray Peat. You can see he can't even actually present a credible argument anymore. He's basically just really damaged himself health-wise with too much sugar over time. Unfortunately, if he only understood the Randall cycle, he would basically be more aware of the deleterious effects of sugar. But he has this confused idea. He still thinks that calories are important. He still thinks that basically, yeah, if you combine a lot of sugar and fat, yes, you will basically engage the Randall cycle, and you will store more of that fat into the fat stores. That's the whole purpose. The whole purpose is to take fat, store it, and then use it when you're not eating. But if you've got low insulin, you can do that. And that's what an ancestral diet does. You're on an ancestral diet, you eat the fat, you take it around in chylomicrons, you deposit it in all the cells, and then you take the part of it to the adipose tissue, you leave some in the fat cells, and then the rest goes to the liver through chylomicron remnants. After that, when you're not eating, because you've got low insulin to glucagon, you're basically releasing those free fatty acids to consume in the non-eating part of the day. That's how it works. But if you're engaging the Randall cycle with high insulin producing foods and putting fat and sugar together, then you're going to be having high insulin all day long, which means you can't access your fat stores when you're not eating and you're starving. That's why you're constantly in the trough. So these things are not explained by Ray Peat, and he talks shit about, a lot of hormones and all that. He's reductionist, very reductionist, and looks at pathways, but doesn't actually look at the interaction, the complex interaction of these pathways. And that's why he misses a lot of things. I've done one thing on Ray Peat, a video on, I've discussed Ray Peat many times. You should go and check that video out. Where is it? Let me just find it. I'll put it in the actual... I need to do another one on Ray Peat. I haven't done...
Oh.
This
is the one.
The peripheral resistance and why Ray Peat Club is wrong. That's right. That's one that I've done a while back. That's one for Spencer. So, which I did at the time. And then there's all the PUFA ones. Go and check those out and you'll realize why. Let me just say another thing about PUFA. This whole thing, ratios, I've explained it quite clear, the ratio of PUFA, completely and utterly unimportant. As long as you're getting some DHA and EPA, and they can interchange themselves, there are inside our bodies, there are basically enzymatic pathways that can switch EPA to DHA and back again. So it's a non-issue. As long as you're getting enough from animal foods, because you will get, if you're eating animal foods, you're getting EPA and DHA. And you don't need much. You've got a 2.5-year turnover. So your DHA, because the majority of your DHA and EPA is in the brain. It's not in the rest of the tissue. Very little is. You've got a bit, but not much. The majority is in the brain. And even there, you've nearly got as much arachidonic acid and, omega-6 to, in the brain. What you have in the differences is in the other tissue. And I'll get to that in a sec. But these sort of systems are only in regards to if you're going from the plant-based. because you need to convert, and you're competing at the enzymatic conversion of LA and ALA, the plant-based types. If you eliminate the ALA, you don't eat the plants, and you get a bit of fish, and even regular meat has some, beef and all that has some DHA and EPA. So you'll get, and you don't need a lot because you've got a 2.5 year turnover. So every day you only need very small amounts of omega-3. Okay. Now the other pathway will actually convert as much as you need to arachidonic acid of linoleic acid of LA. And I'll ask Leaky, how much do you think in terms of omega-6 to omega-3 the human body has, excluding the brain? Like in all other tissue of the body, how much ratio do you think, how much of the two would you think we have? Most people don't know this one.
Yeah, I'm not sure
everybody
myself.
Everybody talks about the 1-to-1 ratio and all that.
Yeah, on the diet, yes.
I just haven't done the video. But
elsewhere in the body, I'd say I don't know, I can't, like, it's hard to say a proper number, but maybe we have more omega-6 than omega-3 in the rest.
We've got more omega-6, 11-to-1.
11-to-1, wow.
Exactly. So you think you don't need enough omega, and it's really important. It plays a lot of biological and repair functions. You don't have enough, and also, in the mitochondria, you actually need it in the mitochondria as well. This is the problem with reductionism. This is the whole problem with reductionism. That when you don't understand about these things, you lose a lot of the information. It goes out the window. So, yeah. But once you understand that basically it plays a critical part in sort of nope, it doesn't matter. Well, the key thing that a lot of people need to understand is that it basically plays a very important role in the mitochondria in all these sort of areas. It looks like a good one. No, that's not. Nah, it doesn't matter. But anyway, yeah, I can't. I'll find it. I'm going to do a video on it anyway about it. But basically, you've got 11-to-1, and it plays an important role in the in the cell wall to repair, because that's the whole purpose of it actually creates all these eicosanoids, all these type of downstream mediators that are involved in inflammation, involved in in healing. So when you actually get a virus your omega, your omega 6s are the ones that actually are healing you, repairing your tissue, doing all that work. Oh yeah, I remember another one in the mitochondria, the cardiolipin, which is after complex 4, the cardiolipin there. Well, that is primarily made up of PUFA, omega 6. That, when you incorporate seed oils, which are oxidized and rancid, that is what damages the electron chain. So it's the seed oils that go in there. But to say that you don't need, for the cardiolipin, you don't need basically the, or cardiolipin, people say it differently anyway. I'm not going to get, that you don't need that is bullshit. You basically need it. It's critical for the electron chain to work properly. But you need to get it from animals which are stable and actually aren't damaged and rancid. And sleep well, because that melatonin will actually repair any oxidation to the mitochondrial electron chain at the night. So anyway, these are the things that these people don't understand, and so they actually are actually promoting the wrong sort of diets and actually damaging people's mitochondria in the long run. Also, people with hypoglycemia on mixed diets, don't they tend to have trouble with gluconeogenesis as well? Maybe it depends. It varies so much. It depends on what the mix is, whether they're pre-diabetic, diabetic, or there's a lot of things. Have a dysfunctional pancreas. It's a very complicated thing, whether you cause derangements in gluconeogenesis and, but it's quite, there's a lot of issues there. So it's hard to say exactly what causes these things, but definitely spikes in insulin will cause hypoglycemic shocks in between and all that. But they can vary in severity. They can vary how they are based on how the body responds. And they will vary between people, Spencer. It's not, one fits all in that regard. But basically, if you're not on a kibble diet, consuming, every 2 hours food, you're not going to be doing this up and down into hypoglycemic shocks. It's people on these sort of diets. The more sugar you put in, the more hypoglycemic shocks you have. This is why you see vegans sometimes passing out, like vegan gains, going into a sugar comatose, putting so much sugar in that spikes insulin so much, suppresses the amount of sugar in the bloodstream far too much, over suppresses. This is why when people say that I'm on a carnivore diet, and when I do exercise, I seem to get my elevated blood sugar, and it remains a bit elevated and then comes down eventually, but it stays a bit longer than in the past. That's because you don't have high insulin anymore, because you've been so insulin sensitive and your insulin to glucagon is so low, you can't overexpress insulin. So even though gluconeogenically you're producing a bit more because of the exercise to replete, that's to replete glycogen. It's not a bad thing. Do you know what I mean? It's not a bad thing. People are getting confused. When I do exercise and I'm in a low carbohydrate state and my insulin is being regulated by being balanced by glucagon, so it doesn't spike and take that out, I'm not going to get a hypoglycemic shock. That's going to be all converted to glycogen. Wonderful. That's what I want. I want basically my body to produce that and put it into glycogen, into the muscles. That's the purpose of it. It's a brilliant system. If you basically at the time had this high insulin spike, you would end up in a hypoglycemic shock, and potentially, because you're only producing a very small amount of sugar in a ketotic state, you would basically end up in a coma. The body isn't stupid. This is why people talk about it out there, and they go, oh, when you're on a carnivore diet or a keto diet for too long, your blood sugar goes up in when you exercise or when you early in the morning. That's normal, because you've used and you need the extra energy. You need to replete glycogen. That's the purpose of it. These people just don't understand physiology, and they think in reductionist ways, and because they think in reductionist ways, they miss the whole plot. So it's fucking bizarre out there, the sort of thinking that actually in the low carb, keto, and carnivore community, people just talk shit. They need to go and educate themselves in physiology and understand how these processes work. They don't seem to understand them very well. But in terms of people on a mixed diet, yep, they will have hypoglycemic shocks, and basically, if you're suppressing glucagon, you're going to have problems producing enough gluconeogenic precursors. Because remember, when these people are on a mixed diet, their glucagon is very low, and basically their insulin is much higher. So they're suppressing the capacity to produce glucose from gluconeogenesis on a mixed diet. So basically that's why they're in the trough every 2 hours, running back to feed the beast because they're running out of energy.
Yeah.
They've got high insulin, low glucagon, so they can't gluconeogenically produce sugar. They've got high insulin in the bloodstream. They can't tap into fat. So what's left? There's nothing left unless you feed the beast. And that's why they're running back to the trough, the cookie jar again.
Yep.
That's what's happening. So, this is just normal physiology. You can't tap into hormone-sensitive lipase and actually access fat if your insulin's high. And you can't actually produce gluconeogenesis, extra sugar that you may need if glucagon is suppressed because insulin is high. It's the way it is, So if you want to basically be in the trough every 2 hours, that's the effects you get on a mixed diet, unfortunately, especially nowadays, the diets that people are doing. In the past, people basically were more physically active in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And so even though they weren't eating excess amounts of calories either, they were basically, energy was much lower, the amount of energy. They were probably, even you take a look at populations like the Okinawans, they say, don't eat more than until you're 80% full. That's a really good thing. And that's why you're basically encouraging the population not to get themselves into a random cycle state, insulin resistant state, by not eating beyond 80% full. So you can do a mixed diet as long as you can control, but that is a culture that controls that behavior. Humans nowadays, especially in the modern internet 21st century, they don't follow culture anymore. They just do whatever the YouTube or whatever social media tells them to do. So that's why now they just eat shit and derange themselves continuously. So, yes. Yes, very much. The funny Devox, they're so damn funny, The veganerized communities. You got to enjoy it. You got to basically enjoy them. What's your take on dairy and eggs? If you can tolerate it, fine. If you can't, don't. It's simple as that.
Yeah.
If you've got intolerance, it could be a gut microbiome issue, but it may not be. If you've got a gut microbiome issue, what I've said to people in the past, get your vitamin D status up because your beneficial bacteria require vitamin D. Simple. Period. I won't say it again. Vitamin D, if you want all the tight junctions from your mouth to your anus, you've got all these mucosal layers and barriers. Those barriers are tight junctions, are only regulated because there are collagen degrading enzymes that are involved in some of the regulation and structural turnover of those mucosal layers, and they need fat soluble vitamins, but in particular vitamin D seems to play a bigger role. Vitamin D seems to play a bigger role in that regard, tight junctions in the digestive tract. They tend to play a bigger role than retinol in the lungs and a few other tissues like the prostate and the breast tissue. But in other areas, they play secondary role to retinol. So it depends on the tissue type. But generally speaking, what I'm trying to say is that, you know, if you've got permeability issues, yep. And you need to basically, and you may have issues with the sort of gut microbiome that you've got. You may have been on a sad diet in the past, Spencer. You may have more Prevotella. See my recent video about it. Yes, very inflammatory if you've got too much. A little is good, because actually a little is actually even good for the lungs. Actually, some Prevotella in the lungs is actually helpful for allergies. So you still need some, and your body will have, because it actually is one of those bacteria that really can proliferate in when there is not many others around. So it doesn't have difficulty in proliferating. So we've got no problems. We just don't want abundance of it, because in the gut, abundance creates issues. You know, so that's the issue. So, and that's what a veganurized diet would do, a plant-based diet. It will create abundance in that regard. Quite. Oops, better zoom there. Zoom. I get my Zoom things. Oh God! There you go. Can't even get my images and comments, private comments right. Hopeless sometimes. I better share this one. I should have basically shared it earlier when Taylor was still around.
That would have been perfect, actually.
Oh yeah. Vegan tears. I like how you
snake juice.
What software did you use to accentuate that, to make it actually cartoony like?
Oh, it is Photoshop.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like a bunch of effects. Like I still haven't figured out everything up to like it's.
Yeah, I've used Photoshop as well. I do have it on this because my work does have a license. I've been able to have one. They've actually, I had an office license as well, and they recently brought back the old program, because what happened was, well, we had a program where they actually got rid of it because we changed to 365 at work. So to be able to share things through SharePoint and stuff like that. But then one day they decided, so because I've been doing some stuff, posting and video things, and it's good to be able to post them via SharePoint and actually send notifications to people in the group to know and actually be able to see them and stuff like that. So training videos, stuff like that. But now they basically said we could actually get an upgraded license. And this year I'm looking at building a new computer, and so I'm going, fantastic, I'll be able to get a license for it. So for Office 365. So because we've got the professional version, so which is great. So I'll be able to get that. Yes, and installed on the other computer. Because this one I was able to get through a special. It was a deal, which my work had, and so we were able to get them very cheap, like a whole Office professional back a couple of years back, or about two years back, for about what did I pay? $35 for the license. Absolutely nothing. Very cheap. So I got the whole license package for the Office thing, and then I had to install it on this computer, and I actually couldn't find the license key, and so I called Microsoft, and now I've actually got an actual legit retail license, because they couldn't actually restore the actual. So they gave me a retail license. They said, so I've got a retail license for this, which is good in that regard. So I can still use it even on the other computer. But I'm going to check with the new policy and see how much they're actually charging, and if it's in that really low price, I'll actually just get the latest version on the other one. So we'll see how that all plays out. I haven't approached my department yet to basically find out and see exactly, because I'd have to get an email from them, because it usually comes from Microsoft. So Microsoft will send to Microsoft, and Microsoft then will send to me, and I will link in and basically do a purchase. So that's how it actually works. So unless they've changed it slightly, I don't know. I'll find out. Just haven't got around doing it yet until I get build the new machine, the new monster. Yeah. So yeah. So basically, get your check my other videos, Spencer. I've got a whole lot of videos on the Swedish. Yes, the Swedish. Oh yes, this is not ABBA. It's Swedish strains of bacteria, which are very good at fixing a lot of issues like pathogenic bacteria. They suppress them, so they can clear them out. Necro Kitty had a lot of issues. She basically had like diarrhea for 2 years, and she took them, cleared them all out. But unfortunately, she didn't have enough of the beneficial, and she started getting constipated as a consequence. So we got her on Metaflor, which is another German one, which actually fixes a lot of the constipation. Plus, she did the 3-month vitamin vitamin B complex. You only take a B50. Make sure there's no cyanocobalamin and all that other shit, that it's a proper one. I do have a link for that. Let me just find it. Got to keep all these lists, Leaky, to provide people with.
Yes.
Yeah, because a lot of the other ones are, you know, a bit iffy. Some of that sort of stuff. So I prefer people getting a B complex that's going to be less problematic, because there's a lot of garbage. Yeah, a lot of questionable stuff in terms of the stuff that's out there. And I've got a whole lot of different ones. So there's sort of variations, like this one. I'll just put them on the screen for a sec.
Oh, by the way, Harry, I think I should leave like in a few minutes, because it's
that's
it's
okay.
about time I sleep.
Yeah, that's okay. You do what you need to do, Leaky. I mean, I tend to. Oops.
It's funny because my sleep has been really nice lately. Like it's like clockwork. I feel like an old man, to be honest, because it's like 11 p.m. and I used to go to sleep so late, but lately it's been like I can't go much past that.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, because that's what you want. So basically,
Yes.
And I'll actually, because all these have different price points, and
Yes.
in that regard, so I always, I don't know what people's finances are like and stuff like that. So I've got to be cognizant of that sort of stuff in that regard. So you've got this one, which is a fairly inexpensive one. It's, you know, and it basically has methylcobalamin. It's also methyl tetrahydrofolic acid. So all these sort of things. It's got a bit of vitamin C, thiamine, riboflavin, The only thing that I don't like about it is it's got too much pantothenic acid. I prefer 50 or less in that regard. It's got a good amount of biotin, which is good for hair, for the hair, stuff like that, which is in eggs anyway. So that's one which is sort of in that category. Oh, hold on. What am I doing? So that's that one there, which has got that price point. Now, if you've basically always had like very low B vitamin status and all that, that's probably okay to do for about 3 months with vitamin D, and then you stop it, because too much pantothenic acid, because it does store, can be a problem for some people with insomnia and stuff like that. So that's what that one looks like. This is the other one, which is not much price-wise, just slightly more in that regard. This is the Earth Blend B complex. And let me get rid of that. And these are much lower levels, which is basically, again, methylfolate, methylcobalamin, biotin. Also, it's got a bit of choline in there as well. So you usually don't get choline and biotin, which you get in eggs. Benfotiamine, which is a B1, which will get past the blood-brain barrier. So that's a pretty good one in that regard. Plus, it's got all these nutraceuticals, you could say. So you're getting a whole lot of nutraceuticals and also some of the probiotics, like rhamnosus. Rhamnosus is good for sperm if you want to increase your sperm count. Acidophilus, some of the others, and a few other things here. Ashwagandha, which is good for with things like too much xenoestrogens and stuff like that. Milk thistle, pretty good for things like the FXR, if you've got fatty liver and issues like that, to help with those sort of issues. There's a couple of things in here, so that's not a bad one if you've got some additional stuff. And then there's this one here, and this is a B complex, this one in that regard. And that's slightly a bit more pricier. In that regard, it's got very high riboflavin, so if people need extra to support the, let's say they've had MTHFR issues, this is probably a fairly good one in that regard. It also has choline. It also even has alpha lipoic acid, so it's only the only one that does. No yeast, soy, or any other products. So this is a kosher one. So if you've got any religious or whatever, it's usually people that have got religious sort of. I usually point them to this one. So those are the sort of things you can do, or you can just basically eat a number of organ meats, which will get a lot of the B vitamins, and you don't need to take any of the supplements, just vitamin D and some organ meats for 3 months. So eating more organ meats than what you would normally. And then basically after that, drop the organ meats, because they are a multivitamin, really, very much have all the B vitamins. So that's your other option. Some people just don't like organs, Yeah. It's just the way it is.
I'm glad I can tolerate the liver, because I felt a good amount of benefit from it. I wasn't expecting it. It was surprising.
Yeah, that's You just have to basically figure HD. If you want to lose, you just basically, let's put it this way. Where do you want the fat coming from? Your body or from your mouth? Simple as that. At the end of the day, if you basically eat excess fat, you're not engaging the Randle cycle. So what you'll do with that excess fat, you will basically remain weight stable. So some of it will actually, you'll uncouple mitochondria. It's like somebody eating excess sugar on a low-fat diet. They'll basically also still, lose some weight. But if they're eating excess amounts, they will basically, and they're getting more energy than the body requires. There's no need to basically use the one on their body, is there? It's simple as that. You're not going to get fatter when you're not engaging the Randle cycle. You have to engage the Randle cycle to get fat, because even just sitting as a couch potato, there is a certain amount of energy that's required just to exist, to survive. The basal metabolic rate is basically, you still need quite a lot. The difference between the basal metabolic rate and your actual needs, maybe 300 or 400 caloric, it's not a lot. It's not massive. People think it's massive. You need more just to basically stay alive, just to keep going, I mean, just because you're not moving your tissue, you think your cells don't need energy? Whether they're walking or not, your legs still need energy. They're still basically doing a lot of cellular things. So the reality is, for a basal metabolic rate, you still basically need some level. So how do you manage the energy flux? Well, I showed you. Remember, there's a video that I did some time ago, and I'm trying to remember what I called it. It was with a rat one.
Oh.
Where was it? Just give me a sec. I'll just jog my memory.
It was something about protein, wasn't it?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, excess or something along those lines, with too much protein.
Yeah, will a high protein carnivore diet shorten your lifespan? That's the one.
Okay.
I think that's it.
When you want to find it, you can't find it.
I got it.
If you got it, I'll you got it, put it in the chat in the chat. And basically, the rat was actually fed like 70% protein. Its intake, its overall. So it was actually high protein, zero sugar, and lower fat. And so basically, all it did was build a whole lot of muscle because of the higher leucine content. And basically, when you build more muscle, your energy requirements go up to maintain that muscle. And that means you're going to be using far more. Your triglyceride numbers will go through the roof. You'll be releasing hormone-sensitive lipase, upregulating hormone-sensitive and releasing triglycerides and the free fatty acids like there's no tomorrow. And your ketones will shoot up very high. And you will start losing rapidly weight. So you don't even have to do any exercise. You can basically do absolutely no exercise. You can be a couch potato, basically. If you're basically getting all the energy from your body, it's not a good thing to do it on a permanent basis, because this is not how we naturally worked. We were lean. We added some fat by going into, and then at the end of the summer, early part of the fall, we actually added a whole lot of fatty tissue on us by engaging the Randle cycle. But then once we shifted from that, our bodies basically then became, again, insulin sensitive. The insulin to glucagon adjusted again, and we started accessing, when we weren't eating animals through the wintry months because we couldn't find them, we were eating our own, we were using our own fat through those months. And so we were more ketotic. And that's how we were supposed to do, swing in that way. But most people don't do that nowadays. So it's not the amount of physical work, it's the amount of energy substrates in the system that will determine how much you can drop. So that's why the old bodybuilders understood this. They used to cut carbs and go high protein, cut carbs and all that. And basically, that's how they literally got there. It was, simple as that. It's not nothing magical about it. You're either eating fat, energy, you're either consuming energy, or you're oxidizing energy from your own body. Simple as that. It's not complicated. I mean, I love fat, and but I realize even myself, if I want those extra couple of kilos that I've got to lose, I need to basically go high protein, because that's the only way. I need to access my own body weight. And having a couple of coffees a day with a whole lot of cream in them isn't going to really do it. I have to cut the coffee out completely, and the cream. Well, it's you gotta use energy from somewhere. It's either you're going to be eating the energy, or you're going to be basically using it from your own body, like our ancestors did when they didn't have a supermarket or a fridge to access it. While I'm weight stable, the thing is, in order, I have to remove that energy that's coming in. I need to access more of my energy from my own body all the time, not just when I'm not eating, all the time. And that's the very important thing that we sometimes forget to do. And that's why we get caught out with a lot of these sort of things. It's not very complicated. That's how the old bodybuilders used to cut. They used to really go and lean out like mad. And that rat used to 70%, just 30% fat, 70%, and that all goes to structural material. So you're only getting, you should be getting a 1-to-1, so you should be getting more energy. So you're still getting enough energy for your gallbladder to work properly. You're still getting enough energy to basically for the fat-soluble vitamins to basically be absorbed. You're still getting enough energy for minerals to be absorbed and all that sort of stuff. So all that still was working. So you got no problems because you're still getting about some level of fat, but you're basically not getting massive amounts. So you're not basically eating those big fatty, you're just eating steaks with, which I wouldn't say ultra lean, no, that have got a bit of fat on, not a lot. And you're taking out all the other discretionary stuff. And we're talking about all those other things, so very important. Parathyroid hormone in relation to calcium, phosphorus, it all has to do with vitamin D. When you basically have a good vitamin D status, the parathyroid issue resolves completely. And also taurine plays a role as well in parathyroid. Taurine basically has this osmotic effect on the electrolytes in the bloodstream. Very important for managing intra and extracellular fluids and the homeostasis of a lot of these minerals. That's why on a low-carb diet with low protein, you have more mineral problems. On a carnivore diet with a higher protein, you have less because you're getting more taurine. Or you can supplement on a low-carb diet. One or the other. So, just for Spencer, because he was asking.
Yes. Oh, Harry, I think I'll be leaving. It's midnight.
Go. Look, I'm about to pull the plug because it's 1 o'clock because I have to be somewhere else as well. So, I'd love to be able to talk more. You know me. But at the end of the day, we still have to be somewhere else or do other things or stuff like that. And let me just see whether I'll say good night to goodbye and good night to you. If I see you on the other one, I see you. Take care, and we'll chat when we chat. Thanks for being
Harry,
here.
Yeah, it's nice to be here once again, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the show, everyone, and I'll see you later if possible.
It's not going to be very long. See you, Leaky.
Stay well. Bye bye.
You too. And just quickly. Actually, I know that somebody deleted this person, but I'll just say one thing. You're an idiot. Absolute idiot, mate. Actually, Christopher Gartner out of Stanford University, who's a plant-based academic, he actually did the A to Z study. Go and check it out. Actually found that the Atkins diet was superior to the Ornish diet, the plant-based one, and was lower in inflammation and everything else when they went back and looked into the data. You're talking shit. You got no idea what you're talking about. Now, John Vonda Planet, I got other issues with that guy, and that has to do with all sorts of other crap and that he was talking about, but that's for another day. I'm quickly going to go through these. Oh, look, me and Bart actually went on, Robbie's site to try and actually, and George was on there as well, but they didn't want to. They ignored me, and they pretty much ignored Bart as well. They said, "Oh, we can't do it now," or anything like some excuse and all that. So, yeah, they don't want to debate. They only want to debate people that they can debate. Georgie Blinkoff talks about, I have genes that basically, many of my relatives and all that, baldness and stuff like that. But my hair's far thicker and better now with animal products than what it was before on a kibble diet. So it's just talking crap. They don't understand the thyroid and all that. They get things mixed up and all that. They think it's just basically, they think it in a very reductionist way. And I've talked about it. This would take too long and I have to go. So if you come back at the later stream and ask me about that sort of stuff, I'll actually explain it very well in that regard. Just quickly, if I missed anything, and then I'm going to blow off here. Rosaline, good to see you here. Pockets with golden cheese. Yes, Harry lines his pockets with golden cheese. Yes, very much. It's called Brie and Camembert, particular. A bit of Gouda as well. That is golden. Yes. Yes, and lard. Wonderful stuff. Yeah, well, you know what? With all that sugar and all that deuterium, your mitochondria are going to love you in the long run. You'll be brain fogged and weak. Yes, the epidemiological claptrap studies. Yes, all that sort of stuff. We're attracting some vagoons now. How interesting. It's good to have some vagoons on here. Just to poke fun. What do you think? Denny, Robbie felt horrible and got low temperature after 2 years on zero carb and needed thyroid and sugar to fix his health. No idea what he was doing. So, and a lot of people, like somebody said, I did a carnivore diet, and they were basically spiking themselves with sugar. They were having all these cheats constantly, and actually deranging their whole metabolic processes. And so I go, so once I realized that, they were just bullshitting. There are people that have been doing an ancestral diet for multiple generations, like even the Maasai. Mary, she actually did take pricks of their fingers to see what their millimoles were in terms of ketosis. They were in low-grade ketosis of 1 millimole around all of them all day long. And she actually tested them. And these are multi-generational people. but on a species appropriate diet, without doing cheats and doing a whole lot of other things, without having underlying issues, health issues, which they haven't resolved and fixed. So some things on the mixed diet can actually, what they do is they can mask, but it's not really fixing, you're masking a problem. So, because you're running a higher metabolic sort of this effect with more carbs in the system, you think, metabolic rate isn't everything, Actually, most centenarians live longer because they're running a much lower. Rats that only live very long run an extremely high metabolic rate, So there's a lot of it on the thyroid. I've talked about it in that other video that I actually pinned. Go and check it out. And I do talk about in my video on this issue, but it would take far too long to explain the complexities about the thyroid and all the different micronutrients that are involved, that are in animal foods, selenium, iodine, and all that. I talk about them all the time, how they interact, zinc, and all that, and the importance of vitamin D. Because most of these thyroid issues are also being complicated by vitamin D, because vitamin D plays an important role in the take-up of a number of important nutrients, including calcium, and at the same time, the regulation of a lot of these minerals together with taurine, which is in animal foods. But the problem is these people speak in reductionist terms and they don't see the complexity, how these things work and interact. And g'day, mate. How's it going? Hey, Harry, can you please share iHerb, what taurine supplements you like? I'll pin it. There. Hold on, I'll get the vitamin D one quickly. So this is the one with the coconut oil. You're welcome. That's the one with the coconut oil in it. So and it's a kosher. So if you're religious or whatever, so it's a kosher gelatin in that one. And this is sort of what some people, this is a cheaper one. Some people may want it, but I don't. But it's also got, gelatin. It's extra virgin olive oil. It doesn't have any other crap in it. So you could say for anyone in your family that may be more plant-based, or sensitive to salicylates, that's an option for them. That one. Yeah, it is required. But if you got to have good vitamin D status to absorb more from the animal foods. So vitamin D plays a role in the absorption. Also, taurine plays a big role as well. And that's, if you're eating enough meat, you should get enough taurine. And what Leaky said there about the K2, yep, very important about K2 and the management. If you're eating animal foods like eggs and organ meats and stuff like that, they have K2. Butter has K2. Camembert, brie, and the nice thing about Camembert, brie, and Gouda is they have very high amounts of the animal form of the vitamin K2, which is MK4, menaquinone 4, which is the only one that actually affects directly the actual genetics. That means can actually interact with the genes, with the DNA. No other menaquinone or K2 can do that. That's the only one that can do that. So let's make it quite clear. It's the animal form we want. We do not want the plant form of K2, like the MK7. Most people can't even convert the damn thing, about a third of the population. So it's pretty much irrelevant. And I think I covered that with a vitamin before. And Neff, you're bloody late, mate. I'm about to pull the plug, so I have to be somewhere. That's okay. You can just go back and actually watch the rest. I have a question next time about cheese, a problem combining meat and uptake of minerals. Well, you know what? Next time we'll talk about that. But look, when it comes to the fat soluble vitamins, play a big role, and taurine as well. But the thing is, I don't worry too much about it. At the end of the day, if you get excess, your body will excrete it out of the bile, as long as your gallbladder is working properly. And if you don't get enough, if you got enough of the fat soluble vitamins and you're getting enough nutrition, the body should recycle through the kidneys or pull a bit more out. So anyway, now that's my phone going off, which means I have to be out of here. So yeah, I would have loved to basically go into more stuff, but I gotta go anyway. Thanks for everybody being here. Appreciate it. Thank your support, your love, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, take care and Mitty, Charlie. Thanks, mate. You're welcome, and be good. And I will. What's now? So we've got about 4 hours and 45 minutes. Will be my next live stream. So I will see whoever's available at the time. Anyway, take care. See you guys. And I'm out of here. Bye.